Okay, so a huge story is breaking right now. A sudden, dramatic military strike in Venezuela has put, well, pretty much the whole world on edge. Tonight, we're going to try and unpack the two very different stories being told about why it happened. Is this really about drugs, or is it a grab for oil?
So, this all kicked off in the middle of the night. The first reports coming out of Caracas, Venezuela's capital, were, well, they were just chaotic. Total confusion, describing a city that was suddenly and violently under attack.
You had eyewitnesses describing these massive explosions just lighting up the entire night sky. And then, a sound that, hasn't been heard on this scale for generations. Air raid sirens, wailing right across the city.
And then, of course, the footage started to hit the internet. Videos popping up online showed something that was just unmistakable. We're talking American military hardware. Formations of special ops helicopters flying low, flying fast, right over the city. You could see their silhouettes just cutting through the smoke. Okay, so what exactly happened in those first chaotic hours? Let's dig into the initial reports and try to piece together the facts as we know them so far.
Right, so this thing was clearly highly coordinated. We're talking around 2 a.m. local time, and bam, at least 7 different explosions rocked the capital, Caracas. But it wasn't just there. At the same time, strikes were hitting a key seaport up north and a military base down south. You can imagine the response from the Venezuelan government was swift. They immediately declared a national state of emergency. So just as everyone around the globe is scrambling to figure out what's going on, the White House comes out and gives its reason for the whole operation. And they did it in a very direct way. Yeah, in a pretty stunning post on social media, President Trump announced what he said was the raid's main goal, capturing Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. So think about that. This wasn't just some attack on infrastructure. This was what they call a decapitation strike, a direct attempt to take out the country's entire leadership in one single swift move. And the official reason they gave, it was crystal clear. This was a counter-narcotics operation. The president flat out called Venezuela a narco state and framed the whole thing as a defensive move, to stop drugs from flooding into the United States. But here's the thing. This claim didn't just come out of nowhere. It was really the climax of a long period of rising tension.
So, to really get what's happening tonight, we got to rewind a little bit. Because the tensions between the two nations, they've been building and building for more than a year.
I mean, just look at this timeline. You can see a really clear pattern of escalation. It all started way back in January 2025, with reports that the president was even considering military options. Fast forward to September, and the U.S. is actually attacking suspected drug boats, deploying warships, and then, by the end of 2025, it ramps up again, the first direct CIA drone strike inside Venezuela. Every single step was a move closer and closer to the full-scale assault we just saw.
So the White House says, this is a war on drugs. Simple. But a lot of the analysts you're reading about in these reports, they're arguing that this official story might just be a cover for a much more valuable prize. And that, right there, brings us to the whole other side of this story. The one that has nothing to do with narcotics and everything to do with oil.
Yeah, see, the whole crucial point here might just boil down to one single number. 300 billion. That's 300 billion barrels. That's the estimate for Venezuela's proven oil reserves. And a number like that, it completely changes the entire strategic game.
And just to put that number into perspective for you, Venezuela's proven oil reserves are actually larger than Saudi Arabia's. Yeah. Now think about that. In a world where global powers are constantly competing, controlling the single largest oil supply on the entire planet, well, that gives you a strategic advantage that is almost impossible to overstate. So when you throw this whole oil context into the mix, you start to look at those earlier actions, like those attacks on the ships, in a totally new light, right? Were they really just about stopping drugs, or was it all about tightening the noose, asserting control in a region that just happens to be incredibly rich in a vital resource?
And that's a huge legal question, by the way. The U.S. is calling these strikes necessary, but a whole lot of international law experts have raised some pretty serious doubts. I mean, can one country just attack another country's ships in international waters, even if they suspect trafficking? It's a really murky area.
So, here we are. We're left with two really powerful but totally competing stories to explain this one military conflict. It's that classic situation, the reason they say they did it versus the reason they might have actually done it. Let's just break it down one more time. On one hand, you've got the official line, we're fighting a narco state, and it's threatening U.S. security. Simple. But on the other hand, you have the analysis that says, nope, this is a strategic resource grab.
It's about securing a resource, oil, that you absolutely cannot do without, especially when you're in a global competition with other major powers.
And really, that is the massive question this whole event leaves us with, isn't it? When a country goes to war, how do you ever really separate the official story from the real one? Is the reason they give the actual reason, or is it just a convenient story to cover up a much deeper strategic goal? That's the question the entire world is trying to answer tonight.